3, 2. All right, we are live. Hello and welcome everyone to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. My name is Marielle Marie, and as always, super excited to roll into this next hour with you all. Our guest speaker is calling from Southern California. I'm originally from Southern California, so I already feel the homey vibes here online. And I just want to make sure that we all feel comfortable and confident in this next hour, as I know we've got folks joining from all over. So if you're just joining us, go ahead and write in the chat box. Let us know where you are in the world, and I will give you a little shout out here shortly. But before we begin, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping rules so that we can all feel comfortable and confident in this next hour. Of course, you could be doing anything else with your time. So if you're here live with us, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this conversation. Even if you're rewatching this video a little later, thank you for taking time to share knowledge and just to participate in that way. If you're live with us, feel free to turn your cameras on if you feel called to do so. This is a safe virtual space. And I believe in visibility. I'm not afraid to kick folks out if we aren't being respectful of everyone's voices. So you have that official invitation there to turn cameras on if you feel called to do so. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat box to drop any comments, any reflections, any last minute questions that might come up. You all have submitted some great questions previous to this conversation, and we're going to do our best to get through all of them today. But in the moment, as you're listening, if something comes to mind, again, I want you all to participate by dropping any questions or your own personal tips and tricks that you want to share with our community here today in the chat box. If you would like to hop off mute, just let me know by raising your emoji hand, or you can drop in the chat box either privately or publicly, letting me know that you'd like permission to hop off mute, and I will go ahead and give you permission to do so. And if you do hop off mute, you will be featured in our live recording as this is being recorded. And this is also a great opportunity to remind you all that if you signed up for this conversation, be looking out for a rewatch email, and that rewatch email will have a link to this recorded video, as well as any links to resources that our guest speaker might bring up throughout the hour. And we encourage you all to, open those links, support our guest speaker, and also share this conversation with your community, with your family, your peers, your colleagues, so that we can all grow together here and just keep supporting each other in these crazy times. So that's the last thing I'll say. Actually, I would love to mention that Power to Fly would love for you to follow them on social media, as well as subscribing to their YouTube channel, so you can keep up with all the great chats that are lined up for us this year. I can't believe it's already almost February. Time is flying by. And if this is your first chat where I'm moderating that you're joining today, I just want to say thank you for joining. I'm going to take a couple seconds to introduce myself before I pass the mic to our guest speaker. So I really love speaking about the importance of emotional intelligence at home, at work, and at play. I feel like we have a lot of room to grow there, so many opportunities to just deepen our emotional intelligence so that we can bring our authentic selves, practice empathy, build our self-awareness, and really change the game. A lot of crazy things going on in the world. And for me, emotional intelligence is one of the keys to unlocking, some holistic movement here. If you're interested in supporting my project, please go to thepositiveforceteam.org. You can sign up for our newsletter, or I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. And in just a few moments, further into the conversation, I'm going to invite you all to drop your preferred ways of connecting in the chat box so that we can start to practice what we preach here. I really like to maximize our time here and network in the most holistic sense. So I'm going to be extending an invitation for folks to drop their preferred ways of connecting, whether that be your LinkedIn, your own website. I've seen folks drop emails and phone numbers because I don't want to pressure one way of connecting only. But if you are interested in connecting with folks who are here today, which clearly, we are interested in the same conversation, I will extend that invitation. So be getting your links ready to drop as I will open that up in just a few moments. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to our guest speaker, Kimberly, who's calling from Southern California today. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us. Can you let us know a little bit about yourself, how you came to learn about Power to Fly, and what you're excited to share with us today?
Yeah, so as you all know, my name is Kimberly Didrikson. I'm the founder and CEO of Learning Motherhood. We are a consulting agency and online community platform built to create a culture around the importance of humanizing the workplace. And we specifically work with supporting organizations and the direct needs of individual working parents. This experience is really derived in terms of how we support working parents was derived from my own experience. So what I went through working for a Fortune 100 company in a leadership role and having children. And from that, I felt this direct need to provide change in corporate America, specifically related to understanding working parents and how to support them in order to retain them in the workplace. And really, that feeling of being alone through this transition was a real thing for me specifically. I looked to the left and the right and said, okay, how do I get through this? And I was quite shocked that every single person I spoke to who was a parent and further along in their journey of career and parenting said, you just power through. And as a mother, someone that was really passionate about her career, had worked 13 years before having our first baby. That was quite shocking to me. It was like, what do you mean we just power through? There's got to be a better way. And so we really took this idea of the experience that I had and then did a lot of research of what other parents were experiencing in other industries and decided, okay, we're in a position now to really support and help organizations do better, learn, grow, and change what the environment looks like for working parents. So you can see that in leadership roles. You can see that throughout the organization versus thinking this isn't the right fit. So that's one of the largest pieces of what we do at Learning Motherhood. We also have an in-person, or we also have a community aspect for individual parents who are going through that transition back to work with a digital service product that helps you through that transition back. So those are the huge things that are really important to us at Learning Motherhood. And just a little bit about me, I have 3 kids. So I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And I have been going through this pandemic, working through this the entire time. And it's been quite interesting, but my fuel, my passion has always been to support working parents and change the landscape for working parents in America. So I also am a certified paid leave specialist for the state of California, a certified fair play facilitator. If you don't know about fair play, it's quite an amazing concept that Eve Rodsky put together to support families and provide resources that will allow better division of labor inside the home that typically, unfortunately, predominantly lands on women. And then we founded with several of our amazing cohorts, this chamber of mothers that works on social impact issues related specifically to mothers in the workplace and how to support things like getting a national paid leave program here in the United States. And lastly, just for our own fun, we wanted a place to kind of chat about like what's going on right now for working parents and mothers. And so we have a podcast called Motherhood and Career Collide.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Just to, scratching the surface of your career journey and your personal journey. I know that you might even dive deeper as you respond to some of these questions. And congratulations on, all of the things that you've been able to do. And I am not a parent, but I do have a lot of colleagues and family and friends who are, and I have just seen, this space shift, for the good, totally lots, we've got a lot more room to grow, but I'm just so proud of all of the, tiny steps that have been made to make this a safer space for families and just to continue to support parents in the workplace. So thank you so much, Kimberly. And before we get kicked off into these questions, I would love if you could cover some of the principal themes for today's conversation.
Yeah, so we are going to provide organizational tips to prepare preparing to come in and out of parental leave, resources to maintain your professional and personal ambition while becoming a working parent, and tips to set healthy boundaries to help you maintain a work-life balance. So we cover these in a really unique way, in the sense that when you look at organizational tips, we're really talking about how to support navigating this transition off and on parental leave within your organization, and how to communicate that, how to get prepared for that transition, but also how to have those conversations with your boss, your coworkers, really supporting this really amazing life change that you're going through, for anyone out in the audience that maybe is going through it a second or third time and kind of experiencing it with a different boss or a different organization. I mean, there's so many different ways this goes. We're going to cover what we can in the time that we have.
Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so that I can pull up these awesome questions that folks have submitted previous to the conversation. Now, if you hear your question come up and you're here live with us, please let us know that you are here, so that we can just make sure that we've got your question covered. And again, as I mentioned before, if you have any last minute questions come up, please feel free to use the chat box, drop those questions, and I will raise those questions or reflections to our guest speaker, so that we can make sure that everyone's voice is being heard. And again, any tips and tricks of your own, it takes a village, and that's one of my favorite, reflections to just lean into. And so since we're here together for the next, 45 minutes, please maximize on that phrase, it takes a village, by dropping your own tips and tricks that you find useful in the chat box. All right, so Kimberly, let's start with this first question here. Let's begin with some organizing and preparation. So this first question reads, at what point should you start the discussion and let your employer know that you are pregnant?
Yeah, so I absolutely believe that this is really subjective based on your own circumstances. Typically, women or dads wait until they are through the first trimester because of a number of reasons, such as concerns for miscarriage, it could be like getting used to the idea of pregnancy alone, like you're kind of going through your own transition of being pregnant, or your partner being pregnant. And then kind of wanting to put a plan together ahead of time. So those are some of the reasons why a lot of parents wait until they've gone through the first trimester to announce their pregnancy. I know that there are some other things that really do play in here. Fear of discrimination because they're pregnant, fear that somehow this could affect their promotion, the job they're interviewing for, the scenario that they're trying to make happen at work. Maybe it's a project they're working on. So there are so many reasons why this could happen. But that is why I feel like this is very subjective based on your experience and your circumstance. So the reality is, some of us just don't even have that luxury to wait for the first trimester to end. It might be challenging for a number of reasons based on higher risk pregnancy or fertility treatments, or maybe you just feel really comfortable and you want to share prior to that. It's really at your disclosure in terms of when you want this information to be out within your organization. And ultimately, it is when you are most comfortable sharing. Although ideally, from a preparation standpoint, if we were to look at the ideal scenario, in the early stages of your second trimester is a great time to share that you're pregnant. So that gives you enough time to prepare as a team in terms of getting ready to go on parental leave. And I will just share for my own self, I will add that for me personally, for our first child, I ended up sharing earlier than I anticipated. And that was because I had a ton of doctor's appointments. And ultimately, my boss, and these are real things that happen, was concerned that I was interviewing for another job. So we had a really great relationship. And so he had no problem asking me this question. And I kind of was at a place where I was comfortable to share because I had built that relationship and knew that it was coming from a really great place. He was a father of with small kids too. So I felt safe. But if you're not feeling in a place to do that, you can ultimately say, I am going through some health things and I am needing to go to the doctor more frequently. And you do not need to disclose it until you're ready to. I think that's really important to share. And if you have any questions on that further, you can always reach out to your HR department to talk through kind of the fact that you are having some health requirements that are going to require some more doctor's appointments.
Great. Thank you for sharing your personal experience as well. And I know many of us would argue that becoming a parent is a full-time job. So in essence, your boss or ex-boss at the time was pretty in tune with what was going on. And of course, the answer was, yes, I'm actually about to go into being a full-time parent. And I wish we could just speak about parenthood that way as well. So that I think that would just also just open up how much, mental space it takes, how much personal, time and dedication and all of that. Of course, I think that parenthood is one of the most beautiful gifts. And we have a lot of work to do in the workplace so that we can honor and respect our parents and our working parents more. So I really like that you were able to share that anecdote and with our community today. All right, let's move on to this next question here. I'm currently in my first pregnancy and thinking about how to organize my maternity leave. How can I organize my work so as not to leave any loose ends for my team members before taking this time?
Yeah, so this is a really great question for a number of reasons, because first of all, preparation is going to allow you so much more time to enjoy your parental leave. If you're even thinking like this, you're probably one of those employees that works very hard, takes pride in what you do, and leaving it to someone else feels really hard, can have some fear associated with it, and also anxiety. So I like to say that first. Secondly, I think that going through this process and preparing for your parental leave is also a demonstration of your commitment to the organization. So you're already starting off thinking in the right tone, because as you were saying, Mariella, it can be great to think the way that you were talking about in terms of like, I'm going to be a full-time parent, but unfortunately, not everyone within an organization thinks that way. So to kind of couple that with obviously the amazing gift that you are going through, whether that is carrying a baby or adopting, whatever the scenario is, we want to celebrate that. And then also demonstrate if there is some fear about your position, your job, any of those things, is to also, these are opportunities to demonstrate your value, to let that fear disappear and also get that reassurance from your organization. So a couple things I would suggest are, I would first list out a week of your responsibilities. So go through the week and write out your responsibilities for that week, tasks that you do, just completely outline it in whatever programming you like, whether it is something that is shared like a Google Doc or a Google Excel sheet, whatever that looks like for you on a programming standpoint, list it all out and then review work projects in terms of completion. Maybe you have some projects that are longer, like 6 months longer. And what does that look like in terms of meeting the expectations of those projects versus the time you're going to go on parental leave? Then based on both actions, create a plan to hand off to your coworkers and your boss. Share with your clients that they will be taken care of while you're gone and introduce who will be covering for you. So this is like methodical, I will say, in the sense that you go through your internal team, figure out who's going to cover for who, and then client facing information. That's when that has all been identified. And then you're in a position to really support your clients and feel like you are going to be all set in terms of your clients being covered while you're on parental leave. Communicate your parental leave transition plan to your boss. Ensure that you meet with a team that will be handling your work and projects while you're on leave several times. So after you've kind of set up the goals for what the transition will be, make sure that you meet with them several times in the later part of your second trimester and early stages of your third trimester. Or if you're high risk, this should start early on in the second trimester, because you really never know like what the future holds in terms of your pregnancy. And this is the last thing that you want to be navigating while you're on bed rest. The other thing is, I recommend highly, do not promise you are available while you're on parental leave. I think all of us are like, hey, I want to support you, and almost feel bad in some cases of like handing off your portfolio of work to your coworkers. But, you know, everyone scratches each other's backs, right? And there's always opportunities to support later on with your coworkers. And so do not promise you are available while you're on parental leave. Ideally, the transition is completed weeks before you go on leave in order to work out any transitional bumps ahead of time and not during leave. And legally, just so you know, in the US at least, you're not required to answer work calls unless it is related to your leave. So for instance, many companies actually shut off your email just to make sure that you will not be on email. So those are some of the main tips that I would recommend. I would also say that give yourself time and space to navigate this. Ultimately, my biggest tip is to have this transitional time figured out, transitioned weeks before you go on parental leave. I cannot stress that enough, because when things come up, you're able to answer that versus transitioning it right before you go on leave.
Great. Thank you for that thorough response. We've got folks writing in the chat box. Someone mentions 100% you'll have enough to feel guilty about in motherhood. LOL. Do not set the expectation that you will be available ever. And so, yes. What about someone who might, I just see some comments here. I may have already suggested that ... oops. So what about this, like, not feeling this oops, this kind of regret, or I don't know if there's such thing as imposter syndrome, if maybe it's your first time taking parental leave or having to go through this, maybe you get better your second or third time, but like, let's say it's your first time, and just how to not feel that guilt. So just to speak to this person who is writing oops in the chat box.
Yeah. So it's never too late, right? Like, we can always reset the expectations, and understanding, like, I want to make sure that you're covered while I'm on leave. And I know I mentioned that I could, be there for you while I'm on leave. However, I am learning a lot about what the first trimester, what the postpartum experience is going to be like. And I believe like we should reset expectations here. So what do you need to feel comfortable with this transition? Because I don't think I'm going to be as available to you as much as I might have set already. So you're kind of putting it back in their court, but you're also showing the support for them. And I think that's the key, is like, you're obviously doing it because you care and you want them to succeed and you appreciate their support and help. So it's coming from a really great place. So if you lead with that, you'll be set to reset those expectations. That's one thing you'll learn in parenting and your career, is you're going to have to reset them several times as you go through this journey of being a working parent.
I know that we're going to get into boundaries a little later, but I just see things coming up in the chat box. Someone says, me too. I still see emails flowing in. Not sure I shall respond or not. So not sure if I'll respond or not. I'd just love to hear maybe I know we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries later, but since it's coming up now, any tips for resetting those boundaries?
Yeah, I think so. This is if you're already on leave. Is that what I'm understanding?
It seems that way. Please let us know for clarification, Swang there in the chat box.
Okay. So if you're on leave, I would, there's two ways to do this, right? Because legally, they shouldn't be contacting you. You shouldn't have to answer those. So there's two ways to do it. You can reach out to your HR team and say, I promise this, but I just don't have the space or room to do this. And they pretty much will take care of it from there. Or you can contact your boss and just have a very clear setting expectations. I'm postpartum parenting, all the things. It's just taking too much of me. I overpromised. I cannot do this right now. Can we figure out who can support them while I'm out? So, I always come from this place, and I know you were talking about it, is this idea of emotional intelligence. So if you're coming from a good place in general, and you're coming from a place of support the organization, because I personally just don't think I'm going to be able to get back to them in time right now, along with understanding your rights while you're on parental leave. I think coupling those together, not demanding, saying, I know my rights, this is what I have my rights to, but looking at it as you are working with the organization to find a solution after you realize, like, I can't do this right now. And ultimately, you should enjoy your time. You earned it. And, you should have that time to bond and be with your baby.
Yes. And this is why I'm an advocate for everyone in the workplace needs emotional intelligence training, so that, let's say you aren't the one that's taking leave, but because you are connected to your empathy, you're connected to your self-awareness, not to bombard, someone who is going through postpartum or, in whatever stage, you don't. It's a big no. It's a big fat no. And you don't even need to be checked on it. Someone here in the chat box Marina wrote, also, you can use your away message to reverbalize that expectation after the baby arrives. For example, I'm on extended leave. Please reach out to XYZ. I'm unable to respond until I return. Would you like to comment on that, Kimberly?
Yeah, absolutely. Put your away message on. When you, depending on where you are in the country, what your parental leave looks like within your organization, this message might go on, like here in California, you can take, if you qualify, you can take 4 weeks prior to baby arriving to transition to arrival of baby. So depending on where you are in that transition, basically whenever you go out on parental leave, that is when you put up that away message in. And I would, that's a non-negotiable at my point. You don't want people going, hey, where are you? I can't get a hold of you. And you want to set that expectation ahead of time. I also recommend sending team emails out before you go on leave. So a reminder, if you're not able to take advantage of a similar scenario that we have in California, which a lot of parts of the country do not have that, really having the ability to set some expectations as you get closer to the end of your third trimester, or if you go out unexpectedly, really making sure that you make that a priority to just shoot out some emails, a team-wide email and a client BCC email that indicates I'm going on parental leave. Here are your contacts to reach out to. I think those two things, along with the away message, over communicating is positive.
Absolutely. And I just want to flag reiteration in the chat box, and we're still going to get to boundaries, specific questions that were previously submitted, but I love that there's just already some flow happening in the chat box. So you asked the previous commenter, Are they already on leave? And the answer is yes, I'm already on leave. They kindly put words like, I'm aware of your leave, but I still want you to, still want to share this with you, blah, blah, blah. And what if my boss is on the same email chain? Thanks for helping me with the concern. So it seems like your advice has already been helpful. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Maybe we can hold off till we get to boundaries. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's fine. But I'm so glad to hear that. That is really positive. And I also know it's really hard to turn off something that you've been doing for 40 plus hours a week for years on end and to just not look at email. I mean, it's really challenging just as a human being. Our habits, it's everywhere. It's on our phone. It's on all the devices, the dinging in our emails from our computer. So, my advice to you is take it off your phone, take it off your computer for the time being, and just really enjoy it because you absolutely deserve it.
Yes. And just to, again, reiterate, emotional intelligence training, I also advise people to unplug, get used to it, because we do have this, this habit of just always being available. And I have to tell people that I love, like, hey, stop taking the phone to the toilet. That is a sacred space. You don't need to be checking your emails when you're in the toilet. It could wait, like enjoy that moment. And so, I can imagine that as you're starting to juggle family and, maybe, bring a new being into this world, it is hard to just break that all of a sudden. So again, that emotional intelligence training that I, propose to folks is like, unplugging is so necessary just for your mental, sanity. And also if you do get into a situation where you absolutely need to unplug, it's easier. You can do it a little more seamlessly. All right, Let's move on to this. Oh, sorry. Did you want to comment on that?
You just mentioned your mental sanity. And I just want to preface this as something to use for your advantage when you're going on parental leave. So these are all things to help you be able to focus on your time with your child. And also another piece is that through those emotional time in that fourth trimester, you could experience some, there is 1 out of 7 Americans go through postpartum depression and or anxiety. And the reality is you want to do whatever you can to set yourself up for success, to navigate what is the unknown, because there is a possibility. And with that being said, these sort of like the anxiety that comes from checking work when you're on parental leave, it's just not worth it in terms of supporting your mental capabilities in support of you returning to work. So you're doing these things to kind of allow yourself to get to the place that you want to go in terms of supporting that transition so that you can come back as a healthy human being, navigating this first year pregnant, postpartum, and really being able to support family and career. There are so many unknowns. And so I just wanted to add that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. I think that's super helpful. And actually more questions are being dropped here in the chat. So someone writes, how long of a parental leave do you recommend after the baby arrives?
So I also feel like that is up to you. I think that, so depending on health reasons, your mental health, that transition can look very different. So when I work with parents going through this transition, some parents are like, is it wrong? I'm excited to get back to work. Like, I want that break. I want that separation. I want something that's my own. No, if you want to get back to work and you are ready to go, then that's your decision. And then others are just really struggling through that transition. So if I were to say what the ideal parental leave is, it'd be really hard because it doesn't generally exist within organizations here. But, between 4 to 6 months, I would say if you can, that's ideal. Again, like I wouldn't put a number on it until you're going through it. That's my advice. But it's hard to say because in America, 1 in 4 women go back after 2 weeks, which is insane. I do not recommend that at all.
And would you say that that's because historically speaking, as you're mentioning, that it hasn't really been incorporated in the protocol? It hasn't really been allowed. And here some of these other countries around the world that, expect you to take time, whether you are the mother or the father. Do you think that there's like this urgency just because it hasn't been really normalized?
Yeah, so we have FMLA, which is 12 weeks of job protection based on employee size within the organization you work with. So again, there's some specifics related to that. So there's so many reasons why parents have to go back earlier. And that includes just financial needs because there is no national paid program in the US. And then in addition, that job protection could or could not follow the needs of your employment. So there's so many facets to why this is not where it needs to be in the US. Companies are stepping up in some areas, and we see that within organizations recently. There's so many that are kind of increasing their parental leave, also providing support for if there was a miscarriage or during the pandemic, kind of giving paid leave for pandemic parenting. So we are seeing more progressive ways, but there's no national program. So it's all over the board, essentially.
All right. So it looks like these companies that, that are trying to reframe diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives have opportunity to, make some changes within the company. So that's the optimistic side of it, because otherwise we can go completely pessimistic on why is this not, put into the system already. Let's dive into some resource questions here about resources. So can you give some examples of the resources that are most helpful to working parents? I know that you've listed some already, but can you maybe dive deeper there?
Yeah, so I'm just going to name a bunch of places, a bunch of companies that you can tap into. And of course, I'm going to highlight Learning Motherhood because it's right there. It's really great in terms of being able to support that transition back to work and providing support through that transition related to humanizing the workplace. So we have experts that join in that our community. You can have access to our Return to Work series to help you through transition, including childcare, and understanding how to get the childcare that you need. In addition to that, really working through time scheduling and understanding how to balance work, which we don't call that. We call it work-life integration. So there's so many things that we include there. And then we also have our experts join in from therapists to pediatric sleep experts to pediatric dietitians, to lactation consultants that also offer dietitian work too, to support that postpartum period. So anyway, that's that piece. And then I would also share that, listen to our Motherhood and Career Collide podcast. And then Working Mom Notes has something to support maybe if you're further along in that journey of working as well. They have a community. I highly recommend reading the Fair Play book. It is life-changing for division of labor in your home. And it can also translate to the workplace. And then if you are pregnant, I would recommend looking at pregnantatwork.org to understand your rights while you're pregnant. And it actually does get to your state level as well. In terms of really cool, fun training stuff for your kids, Bummo Parent is great. They also have Bummo Work and Bummo Care that they launched, which is awesome too. And then the Mom Project, which I had the pleasure of speaking with. And there's some really great new resources to share.
I love that. And I also want to ask our live callers if you all have any resources that you have found beneficial, or maybe just that you want to ask, questions about, please drop those in the chat. And also please drop your preferred way of connecting in the chat. I don't know if this is helpful for this group. I think that it might be, but what I like to do is sometimes, people are looking to transition careers or, need a little support with practicing what I call role play before they, are met with the hiring manager. In this case, maybe you have to kind of have that tough question of speaking with your manager or your boss about taking parental leave. Connect with some of these people who are here right now live with us and do some mock conversations so that you can kind of get that get the weight off of your chest and at least practice and maybe write down some things that seem to have been working in that role play. So this is my invitation for you all to drop your preferred ways of connecting in the chat box and maybe reaching out to a couple of folks so that you all can practice some role play there if that sparks your interest. But I come from the world of performance and film and theater, and I just know the benefit of like practicing before actually having to do something. And I can imagine that in this case, it might be really overwhelming to have that conversation. And so please make use of this community here as we are, like-minded in this topic today. All right, so let's move on to this next question here. As a life coach, I've worked with women returning to work after maternity leave, and there tends to be a lot of guilt and unrealistic expectations that get in the way of mental and physical wellness for the individual. What are some ways to relieve or navigate these destructive thought patterns as a new working mom?
Yeah, so this happens in our line of work all the time. And, I would say that I kind of look at mom guilt as something that's been told to us as a societal requirement of what a mom should look like, what that role should look like, how you show up to that role, how you interact with your kids. And I personally believe, and this is how I deal with it too, is just take that away for a second. Instead of what you feel like you should be doing, let's talk about what you're doing for your child. Giving the opportunity for them as a working parent, giving them the opportunity for them to build relationship with others, as well as you wanting to like have your children foster bonds with others. And that includes like adults and children. So you're giving this amazing gift. And if we can switch that line of thought and start thinking about what we are doing, then that will help when those guilt voices come into our head, because they will. It's not like it disappears 100% when you say it once. It's more so it's an active practice. And another thing that I will say that helps moms like us, there's a lot of guilt related to being away from your child and working and feeling like, I'm missing out on something, and or I'm not there to support them the way I could support them and someone else's. And so navigating that, I would highly recommend, and this was one of the best advice that I got from a toddler expert when I was pregnant with my second child. I was exhausted. I'd come home from work and my first baby was now just over a year. And I was like, how am I going to get through the next 3 hours before bedtime? I was literally so tired. And all that kept seeping into me was this level of guilt. Like I can't give the same level of energy to my child. And this advice was so huge. It said, focus time is better than all the time. Focus time is better than all the time. So 20 minutes of playing on the floor with my 1.5-year-old while pregnant with my second was more valuable than 3 hours of being in the same room, but not being able to give that level of attention. So I'm just using that as an example. But there is this thought that, we are not there all the time, but we are, as working parents, we are providing very focused, intentional time. And that means so much and so much more than all the time.
I love that. I love that advice. And I love that you're able to, pass it down to the next so that people can kind of have it as a mantra as well. Because as you said, sometimes these negative thoughts and self-limiting beliefs and, the guilt mindset comes in, and just to fall back on that quote, I think can be very empowering. And especially as there's so much uncertainty happening, specifically right now. Becoming a parent right now is probably different if you've already been a parent when you were parenting before this pandemic era. So that is a great quote to continue to reflect on. And I'm definitely going to share that with some of my parent friends. So thank you for that. All right, so we've got a little over 10 minutes left. I just want to let everyone know. So if you have any last minute questions or reflections or tips and tricks of your own, feel free to add those to the chat box. If anyone would like to hop off mute, just let me know, as we do have a little over 10 minutes left. So I would love to give you the mic to share your voice. Otherwise, I'm going to be moving on to this next question. I see a question here. Will this be available to rewatch? Yes, it will be available to rewatch. If you signed up for this conversation, you're going to get a rewatch email with the link to this video. And also it's going to be on Power to Fly's website as well as YouTube. So you definitely have more chances to rewatch here. All right, so let's move on to boundaries. One of my favorite topics. All right, so how can you reintegrate and not be left behind when coming back from maternity or paternity leave when you work remotely? I threw a lot at you there, so feel free to take your time unpacking that.
Yeah, so my advice on this is to first set up time with your boss when you return to work to discuss your reentry for workload and timelines. And you set the tone of that meeting. Really making kind of realistic transition to what that will look like. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that as well. But you're setting the tone. That's also showing your commitment to the organization. And that also shows your want to return to work. It also gives some initiative, which are all the things that an employer wants to see in their employee, whether they are a working parent or not. These are all like really great tools to utilize when you're transitioning back to work. So a couple things that you can add into that transition plan is to set up meetings with your colleagues rather than go through 1,000 emails. Set up emails with those that were set up meetings with those that were covering for you. Take all those emails, shove them into a folder, and have those conversations. 1,000 emails could literally be your inbox when you return. And that is so overwhelming and not something that's going to be beneficial for you to focus and really support that transition back to work. It's honestly going to be way too much. So don't take that on, move them into a folder. Set up these meetings, put this in your transition plan to your boss, and then take your time to get up to speed. Utilize a block calendaring system to schedule your time frame for different activities through the day. Don't overbook yourself with meetings in the first 6 weeks if you can. I know there are things that come up that require your time. Here's where block calendaring really becomes so crucial, is because you're kind of deciding when you're going to take that meeting and if you're going to take that meeting. Some of these things that I know for many of us, depending on what time zone we're in, when we transition back to work, that 7 o'clock meeting that we might have been able to take prior to going on parental leave might not be realistic anymore, right? And so time block out those transitional times that you are having time with your family. So my company was located on the East Coast and I was on the West Coast. So I would get meeting invites at 5 o'clock in the morning. So blocked out 5 from 8 p.m. I'm sorry, I'm not available. So really kind of, and then that allows you to decide, well, I actually can make this one work, or I can, but it's on your terms. The other thing is do not overcommit to unrealistic timeframes. Give yourself some time to work through your routine. So you're coming back, you're trying to prove yourself, you want to show that you're still this great employee. And then all of a sudden you're making these unrealistic expectations that you are going to drive yourself crazy in trying to meet. So don't do that to yourself. And it's also, as a leader, I think you're setting a precedent if you're coming back into a leadership role. of how this works for a working parent as your employees are looking to you to say, is this feasible when I have children? And then the last thing I would say is in your signature, we were talking about out of office and signatures, maybe share your time frame of when you're going to be returning back to work, or your time frame in terms of response. So that can be, I see your email, I know it came through, but I just returned from parental leave. It's going to take me X amount of days to respond to you. Please be patient with me. If it's urgent, mark it urgent, and I'm sorting by urgent, those type of things, or put it as an automatic out of office. I got your email. I just returned, however you want it, you feel most comfortable. But those are some other trips and tricks that you can do.
Yes. Good. Don't worry. We've got about 7 minutes left. You have been sharing a lot of knowledge, and that's why I invited you to get the water before. So, because, we need you to stay hydrated because you're sharing so much knowledge today. And I just want to flag really quickly something that's being dropped here in the chat box. And again, we've got about 7 minutes. So take your time with this question. And if we have time for more, then I'll get to some other questions here. So, hi, I'm about to be a first-time and single mother, and I'm due in about 3 weeks. I'm out on disability, but I've been in the job market for the past few months. What is your advice on applying and accepting work while either pregnant or while taking PFL?
Okay, so I think that really depends on the financial scenario. So if it's a have to, my advice is just, as I just we've talked about boundaries a little bit in here, but my advice is to really look at the job description to make sure it's feasible within your circumstances. And what I mean by that is you don't want to say, yeah, I can do this, and then the expectations do not meet what you're able to do, or it's not a friendly environment for working parents. And you can tell that by so many things, by the website. Look up some of the leaders on LinkedIn, see what they're showing. You can kind of do your own research in terms of understanding where that lies. I think the important thing is you have the opportunity to be selective in the sense of finding a place that's right for you versus trying to find a company just to meet the need of being employed. Now, sometimes that's a luxury. That's why I said that it depends on your financial need. In terms of saying you have a family, I always find having a family to be an added value to every organization. You're like an insane multitasker. You have driven work skills in terms of being able to want to have a career and be a parent. There are so many things that come with the makeup of that, and it's very well worth sharing those. I would not hide those, because if a company doesn't support it, then it's certainly not the right fit for you. The other thing I would say is really kind of lean on your support network. So if you don't have one, start to create one. You do not need to, quote unquote, power through this experience. As a single mom, I can imagine that support is so crucial, right? That's so needed for single parents. And that network, in terms of asking for help, can be just slightly uncomfortable. But know that people want to help you, people want to support you, and people want to be there for you. And they are out there. They are definitely out there for you. It's just finding it and putting yourself out there, which is also can feel like a lot, but the reward is so worth it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being optimistic in that reflection, because I'm sure that it probably is very overwhelming to be in this position, but I really appreciate you dropping that question in the chat. And actually, I've interviewed some women last year. I don't remember the exact website. I was trying to do a quick search now, but around job sharing and role sharing, that could potentially be something that works in this situation. I'm just dropping some links that I found recently there, and feel free to do a quick search and just understand what is that like. Job sharing, role sharing, there's always some big question marks about what does that really entail. That could be also another opportunity, or reaching out to people who are here now. We've got several people who have dropped their LinkedIns. I would, go to this network here that's with you right now to see if anyone, has any other recommendations as we are about to end this conversation. But, I want you to continue to be hopeful and use these resources and network. And actually, this is a great time. Kimberly, you've dropped so much knowledge already. As I said, we've got about 3 minutes left. So can you leave us with some food for thought? And then just remind us how we can connect with you when we finish this conversation. So for any parents who are, wherever they are on the spectrum of either they've already, started or they're thinking of, starting a family, how can they best reach out to you?
Yeah, so food for thought. I just want to make it really clear. You do not have to go through this experience alone. You asking for support is not a weakness, it's a strength. And you deserve to work for an organization that supports you. And advocating for yourself is a huge responsibility, but it's an amazing one that has huge benefits to you. So, so much more to say there, but for essence of time, so you can find me at learningmotherhood.co, so CO, and you can find me on Instagram at Learning Motherhood. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can go to our LinkedIn profile for Learning Motherhood, and then Kimberly Didrikson, Didrikson, is my last name, and you can follow me there as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for just the beautiful work that you're doing in this space. We need more folks like you who are just, trying to encourage parents and also people who aren't parents to be more inclusive to folks who need to take that time off and be respectful, and to keep everyone safe and supported. So thank you so much for the beautiful work that you're doing. Again, if you signed up for this chat, be looking out for a rewatch email with a link to this recorded video, and we'll make sure that Kimberly also adds any links to resources so that you can easily access them there.